ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Twilight Show on Teachers Talk Radio. At the Twilight Show, the sun's still out. You can see the sun is still visible. It's really great to be here. I'm absolutely buzzing, guys. This is my debut, and I'm going to introduce another great guy who's also going to make his debut today on TTR. So we're going to have a little chat in a bit about working in challenging schools. What's it like to work in challenging schools? What do we mean by them? What can maybe lead to a school becoming more challenging? What can we do when schools maybe become a bit too challenging and it becomes a little bit unsustainable in terms of various things like that, getting new staff in and various things. So we're just going to have a chat. It's going to be a nice light-hearted chat. If you can see me, I'm trying to get out of the sun. Who knew that was going to be a problem today? I didn't see that come in. But guys, I'm really excited to welcome a guy that I've followed for some time now on Twitter, and it's really nice to put a face to a name. I'm speaking to Yannick today. How are you doing, Yannick?
Hello, good evening. Yeah, quite well, thank you.
Excellent. So because we're both new, I'm going to move my camera back a bit. Because we're both new, and just a little introduction to myself. Now, both myself, my guest and myself, we're quite experienced teachers. We've been in the game for some time, 20 years plus, both of us, I believe. And like I said, we're going to talk about challenge. Now, myself, I've worked in 6 schools, and 3 of them I would call challenging. I would refer to those as challenging schools that I've worked in, and 3 maybe not so challenging. So the first thing we need to sort of do in a minute is talk about what I mean by that. But Yannick, I'm just going to ask you a little bit about your experiences, and just to fill us in a little bit on sort of your career to date, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I did my PGC in 2000 in New York, so that's fairly easy to remember. I've been teaching 25 years, teaching languages. Obviously, I'm French, as you can hear. I've had a stint in an FE college, and I went back to mainstream education because FE college just doesn't pay well, actually, and it's not as much holiday as a teaching. And so I would say only my latest school I would consider is a challenging school. I've always worked in good or outstanding schools, and now I'm in a school which has been inspected last year, and we got IRA in every single category, and our results were the worst in the county as well. So that makes it challenging school. And I suppose, I don't do that, the behavior and probably the reputation. So not easy.
So that's interesting. So again, it's kind of maybe in a school that things have changed quite a lot, because it is sometimes surprising how quickly things can change in schools, where you work in a school where you go in and you think maybe there's a change in leadership, a change in circumstances. I've certainly experienced that, where you get that sudden, almost unexpected change maybe, and it becomes more challenging. And I suppose there's all sorts of reasons why that could happen. So while we're on the subject, when I was thinking about challenge, like I said, somebody might come back and say, well, hang on, Tony, all schools are challenging. What are you talking about? There's no easy ride. There's no easy option. And I think that would be a fair comment, to be honest, because there's always going to be challenge of some kind. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Yannick.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, because I do feel somehow I've probably got better control of the students in my school now than maybe I have had in the past in some schools that were a lot better. I think the behavior is different, but so the kids I teach are very, are very rough in your face. But I was, for example, very surprised that, when I went into my school and I talked to the kids, morning, how are you? Like, as you say, I said, fine, sir, how are you? And I was a little bit surprised because I've never quite been in a school where the students were asking how you were back. And I quite like that kind of, genuine interest is when you ask someone how they are, you actually mean it. And
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny you should say that, because I think I can speak in a similar way. The school before this one had a much better reputation, better results. They'd recently got an Ofsted good. But I felt there was a bit of a disconnect. I felt like not that I didn't fit in, but I felt like it was it was a very sort of traditional, you're the teacher, I'm the student. There wasn't that sort of close relationship that you need to have, I personally think, in a challenging school. Because when you're in a challenging school, particularly in a catchment where maybe there's socioeconomic issues and maybe there's some deprivation, I think you're almost like you're more than just a teacher to them.
yeah, I mean, yes,
I don't know if you'd agree with that. And it does feel very different to me. It does feel very different.
Totally. And we'll also talk about the parents, won't we? I mean, there's just so many things to talk about, to be honest. But for example, in my school, when we've got parents' evening, last parents' evening, year 11, only half of the parents attended. I mean, that is pretty shocking in year 11.
It is. And you do, yeah, I mean, it can be a double-edged sword with the parents. I tend to find in a more, the son's moved, the son's chasing me. This is brilliant. Yeah, you tend to find the parents are maybe a bit more hands-off in a more challenging school. And I think maybe that is one. I'm not saying it's a downside, because we want parents to be engaged and involved, don't we? But there can be a little bit more pressure from the parents and higher expectations, as you'd expect in a less challenging school, that you don't tend to always get in the more challenging catchments.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave. I was going to close the curtain, but what the heck? Let's have a bit of sun. While I'm thinking about it, one of the things that I probably need to do a little bit more is a little bit of reading around what I do, a bit of reading around my job. So on that note, guys, I need to just mention to you, I'd like to just mention John Catt Books. If you look at the bottom of the screen there, there's a code that will allow you to get an amazing 20% off if you go to the John Catt website. So that's John Catt Books. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off. Okay, so right, let's sort of dig maybe a little bit deeper down into this. Now, I suppose we've talked about challenging schools, and we've talked about how schools, or in the past, you and I, Yannick, have talked about how schools have changed in the last 20 years. What would you say about how actually being a teacher in schools?
Yes, I mean, yes, we're talking about that, weren't we? Like in that, when I started, schools were very much a community place where you met people in the staff room. You made friends very much in your school, and people usually lived locally. Whereas now we've come to a place where everybody's got their own staff room. People only meet in the morning. People just can't wait to get home, and that's kind of. I mean, also think, as I was saying, I think the problem of schools is that of the system maybe is that we've got a system that has allowed for, to some extent, for some self-promotion, and people going to schools do things to get promotion, self-promote themselves, rather than have the time to genuinely take an interest in the kids and in the staff. I mean, in some of the schools I've worked, there was a clearly directive not to be friends with your team. That was very explicit. And is it, how have we become like that? We've managing people. We're not
absolutely
don't have time to. I mean, yes. Remember, going to on a Friday, there was certainly the expectation that you would go to the pub, have a pint and a fish and chips, and Friday afternoons were just a different kind of.
So ironically, yeah, I mean, so there's several teachers I've spoke to who've been teaching 20 plus years who used to remember the times when you used to pop up to the local pub and have a pub lunch on a Friday and dash back in time for period 5, hopefully. But there was more camaraderie then, I think. And obviously, ironically, I think to an extent, maybe we need that back, because if we're in a challenging situation, and now, do you think, that's the other question that I've been thinking about, do you think schools have become more challenging in the last 20 years since we've been teaching, Yannick? Do you think it's got more challenging?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, everybody will say that the job is different. We are more and more asked to do things. I mean, to sort the society's problems. You know, like, yeah, to make up for what the parents don't do, for what society don't do. I mean, yeah, I think, up to some extent, it's the role of school, but there is just so much to do that is becoming very difficult. And I mean, the job is certainly quite different, and all the pressures, the paperwork, meeting every single student's need in your lesson. I mean, I've got a PGC student at the minute, and I must say it's hard, because when you start, you think, well, how am I going to do all this? It's just too many things to do.
Those expectations are really ramped up, aren't they? And again, yeah, I suppose there's a myriad of factors that have caused that in the last 20 years. I started to notice the increased challenge, and that there was more scrutiny and higher expectation. It was around like the late 2010s, around 2009, around that sort of time. I remember someone coming and watching a lesson, and I'm thinking, well, I always get good. Those were the days when you got the Ofsted gradings in lessons, and that was accepted. And I always got good, and suddenly someone came in and said, well, actually, that's not quite good. I think it was at the time satisfactory. That was before we had RI and requires improvement. And I think that increased. That was around about the time it felt for me anyway. And we started to move more towards the model of academies, which led to people in leadership roles, where they were having higher expectations. They had a role, they had expectations on them that they were passing on. So I do feel like that was a bit of a time of change. What do you think about that?
Yes, I mean, it is very difficult, that being observed all the time. I mean, also it's observing is something I find that hard myself, and I've been a head of department for so long, for at least 15 years, and it's I've always found that quite difficult, because we always look at things negatively. I mean, we always go back to the same discussion. Imagine a plumber coming to do your stuff, and he said, well, I'm sorry, guy, you could have done that better. But what other job has kind of that level of scrutiny?
Absolutely.
And I would tell that to my plumber, not knowing anything about plumbing myself, but just judging on some sheet I've got, because, let's be honest, a lot of people who are in SLT haven't got a clue what they're doing,
I think there's an argument for that. And I think we made a mistake. I remember actually when I'd been teaching maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and I was starting to think maybe I could do a bit more. Maybe I could look for promotion, a second in department or whatever. And I remember someone actually saying to me, if you're not showing that you're trying to climb the ladder, schools are going to be suspicious of you.
Yes.
It shows a lack of ambition. I remember someone telling me that, and I remember, and I thought quite recently, what terrible advice that is.
Yeah.
That is such terrible advice.
It's true, isn't it? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? In your seat,
Exactly.
Oh, great, yeah. Someone with ambition. Wow.
Yeah, and there's ambition, which is obviously good, and you have people that have ambition, and we need those people. But I think what you're saying, and I totally agree with you, is there comes a time for that. I think you need to sort of be able to do the job really well. And I spoke to a head teacher, as I said, at the weekend. We won't say who, but he very his opinion I definitely do respect. And he was very, very straight on that. He said, I'm a very good teacher, and that comes first. It's all about, showing people how to do it, literally modeling it to people. That was his point, that you need to model it in order to build, to get that respect from people. People will know, you don't need to. And another piece of advice I had as a head of faculty was, it's not about you. You don't need to talk about how great you are. And when I've had heads of faculty who want to be all about them, look at me, I'm working so hard, I'm doing this. And I have had that in the past, where I've had people who's like, oh, I've been working so hard. I worked 10 hours last night. I've done this and this and this. And I'm thinking, well, I don't need to be told that. If you're really good at your job, people will notice. So you don't need to self-promote all the time, kind of thing.
I think the academization, the math culture. I've worked in a place where you absolutely needed to be in people's face all the time. That it's the math I worked in is not an exception, unfortunately, and that's what I'm talking about. Self-promotion. I come here, gonna change a few things, make quite a few people's life a misery in the process, because it's about me. And then I'll be ready to move up very quickly. That's happened far too much.
The ends justify the means kind of thing, and you do get people, who really do believe that, and they don't have those skills of actually. Sometimes you've got to manage people a little bit. It's not just about the numbers and the numbers on the spreadsheets and the outcomes and everything else. When you're managing people, I think you've got to have the skills in order to manage those people to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's like everything. There's like, I mean, obviously, up to some point, the level of scrutiny is great, because they are lazy teachers, and they are people who have gotten away with doing so little. So it's great, but like everything, so because of that, everybody suffered, including teachers who were doing the good thing, but not necessarily in the way other people wanted them to do it. And that's we're all about consistency, and up to some extent it's great, but also up to some extent it's not so great, because where's your. When I was at school, in France, obviously I had teachers teaching me English, and obviously at the end of the day, I wanted to come to England because I love this subject. But I had teachers with such different styles, doing so many different things, year after year, and that was great to me. Here, everybody's doing the same. It's very hard to, where do you show your passion in your subject? Like, for example, if I'm talking about me, like me teaching French or Spanish, there's something I really like, and I would want to share that with the students. All right, look, that is my favorite book. Let's study it. But I can't do that because it's not in the scheme of work. And that, I think, that would make the difference to some kids. Would think, when I had Mr. Berlin, that we did this, that was great. But that never going to happen.
Just being able to go sort of a bit off piste with things occasionally, isn't it? Because that's the other thing that leads. This is something that I say that some people don't like, and I know I can think of people that wouldn't like me saying this, and I've sort of had arguments before about it on it. But this idea, every moment has to be learning.
Yeah,
I don't agree. I don't agree, because when you work in a challenging school, you may agree, you may not, Yannick, but I think if you work in a challenging school, you've got to have those relationships, and that's the other thing. Relationships. That's the other thing that's controversial, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's this spurious thing, isn't it? Relationships, and people think, well, what really is that? And like you say, if you've got a PGCE student, how do you teach someone to have good relationships with students? It's not something that it's not a quick fix.
No.
But to me, making it a pressure cooker. The phrase I use is pressure cooker. So we haven't helped ourselves. So when we talk about challenging schools, we've got to take some responsibility. I mean, well, I don't know about us, but as a profession, we've got to take some responsibility for that, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, you were so right. I think, if you think about the word, the word relationships, well, we're all in some kind of relationships with our partners. It's not, you don't establish a relationship in a day, in a week, in a month. when I start, I mean, now, I've only been a couple of years at my school, and I think I'm well established, and the kids really respect me. And I mean, they'll come, they'll be quiet, and sometimes people say, "How do you do that?" But what they don't see is when I came, the first day I came, it was a January, 5 lessons. I came, I had nothing. In the evening, I thought, "What, my God, what have I done?" And for a couple of months, it was awful. And the kids were saying, how long you gonna stay, sir?
That's a
And
classic, isn't it? That's a classic. 'Cause
but
I think they assume you're going to give up on them, don't
of
they? I've
course,
worked with a lot of students like that. They're like, "Sir, do you?" That's the classic, isn't it? You'll be
yeah,
having a bit of a lesson where there's some challenge, and a student will pipe up, "Sir, do you actually like your job?"
yeah.
I'm like,
Do you like us? Yeah.
"Yes, I do, actually. Sometimes, most of the time, maybe I wouldn't say sometimes. It is
And
most of the time. We enjoy that challenge, don't we?" But
yeah.
it's like I said, that I don't know if we've helped ourselves with it. I really don't think we've helped ourselves with how teaching has gone.
I mean, do you know one of the things as well? We talk about content, knowledge rich, and yes, you need to learn things. But I think what we tend to forget is that now, like 30 years ago, there was a lot less to learn. Now there is so much more to learn, and we've got to make choices. Do less. I mean,
Yeah,
do less.
really.
And just enjoy it, enjoy education a bit more. It's always, again, I come back to the fact that I'm French. There was never really a question about, the goal of education. In France, you just go to school and then you do what the teacher says. And here we constantly redefining what education is for, what should we teach and why. I mean, we are teaching to the exam, unfortunately, and that probably needs to change a little bit. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
We've very much restricted what students can do, and that, as a result, they are miserable. A lot of students, they are miserable, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's not much fun in education.
Yeah, 100%. And I've been thinking this over the last few weeks. These students aren't. It doesn't sound nice to say it, but these students don't like school. They're not enjoying school. So we could start to say, well, it's because they're not resilient. It's because they're parenting issues. We can talk about all sorts of devices, social media, the fact that they're immersed in this digital world that we're trying to drag them out of all the time. But we could talk about all these things. So I'm chinking some bottles there. I'm not drinking them yet, I promise.
That was before the show.
Yeah. What was I saying? But honestly, I can't remember what I was saying now. What was I saying?
Yeah, no, you're.
It was going to be an amazing point, though, Yannick. It was going to be probably one of the best points.
Yes, it's like, you say that, yes, students don't enjoy school. We say they're not resilient to the technology, but
yeah, and they must. That is something that we probably need. Well, we can start. There's two ways to go, isn't there? We either go down the route of we're going to force students to fit to what we want, or we can start drilling down into why they're not happy, and we can try to sort of find ways to work with it. But obviously we're confined by the limitations of the system. But it was interesting hearing you talk about France, actually. Do you think, is France similar to here then, would you say, Europe?
No, it's very different. So the things I like here is that I think we go above and beyond in terms of knowing our students, their circumstances, helping them, supporting them. In France, the teachers very much go and teach. 18 hours a week, and then you can come and go as long as you're here for your lesson. So there's a lot less pastoral, I would say. It's like the school is not seen as a place where you do. I mean, I hope my French colleagues wouldn't disagree. There is some, but the head teacher, for example, is only an administrative person. He doesn't hire his staff. So there's a lot of things I absolutely love here. As usual, it would be to have a mixture of both, like we're just going too far the other way, expected to do everything all the time, and that's why people burn out. And you always pointed at what you're not doing in our jobs. It always, isn't it? Or that parent that's complained about you. And it's hard.
I wanted to pick up that point you made earlier, actually, where you mentioned about the plumber. No one's going to come and look at the plumber's work and say, "Oh, you could have tightened that up another couple of turns," or you should have put the taps, at a slightly different angle. You know what I mean? Whereas we get that. Someone will come in and they'll feel obliged to say, well, if you thought of this, EBI, and, even better if, what, and sometimes it feels like, it sometimes feels like they're scraping the barrel. I mean, of course, you've got to share good practice. You've got to be honest. But at the same time, sometimes it feels like they're plucking things out of the air. And actually, sometimes what teachers might want to hear is, you know what, you're doing a really good job. I think you just need to carry on with what you're doing. And I don't even blame the people saying that, because I've worked with a really good deputy head, for example, who's quite sort of corporate, doing their job really well. I've got a lot of time for them. They walk the walk. They're not just sort of dictating, but occasionally they will say, it will feel like they're just saying because they feel like they should. So it's the feeling that they feel under pressure, that if they don't say something that's profound, that they think going to improve your lesson, then they've sort of failed. But I don't know. It's a weird sort of situation. But I mean, going back to what the other, with risk of going off topic, but you say that in France, and I don't know whether other European countries are similar. I know that Tom Rogers has gone to work abroad, although he doesn't like to say where.
A place in the sun.
He escaped. He's got away. But I mean, I'm in the sun. Who needs to go away to get in the sun? I could just sit here. I would say where I am, it's a particular place where you wouldn't expect there to be lots of sun, but yeah, I'm trying to go under the radar. But anyway, so the students in France, because there's less of a, maybe if we call it a touchy-feely, knowing their needs, which is good, and I do agree with that. But because they don't do that so much in France, would you say that maybe they're not as happy? Are they also not happy in France? Is it a thing that goes across to Europe, that students don't seem happy?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I've been out to France. I still got teachers friends there, but yeah, I think they're also a little bit more independent, though, is in that they need to sort themselves, because they won't necessarily have someone to rely on all the time. Not necessarily as spoon-fed as our students.
So maybe they're learning to be more independent, or they're more resilient, perhaps, dare we say?
Yeah, but no, they're not happier. That's nobody's.
I suppose the elephant in the room, and again, some people do, it's amazing what you can say about teaching that some people aren't going to like, isn't it?
Yes, yes. As we were saying, we're all passionate and we've all got ideas of how the job should be done and how students should be treated. Yes, there are things that I do that don't necessarily align with the way I would like things to be, but that's society. You'd love it if people didn't throw any rubbish on the floor, but people do, and it's because adults a lot of the time are no better than children.
Absolutely.
Teachers sometimes are terrible, awful people. But as usual, it's not everybody, and there's school is a micro society, and we all need to work together, and sometimes it's not easy as well. There is also bullying amongst adults, isn't there? So it's quite.
There is. We aren't always best role models, and that's another thing that I think. And going back to my sort of pressure cooker analogy that I was talking about earlier, I think that also feeds into that idea, that we're not making it any easier for ourselves. I had a really good point in my head, but when it's my brain today. When you get to the end of the day and your brain is like, woo.
Oh, that's right. Can we remind people that we've been teaching today?
Yes, 100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah, we have. And I have to say, I don't know about you, Yannick, but it's been a bit of a challenge. Students, I find that they don't come back well off of holidays.
So you've got to start all over again because they've been wild for 2 weeks, and yes, you've got to re-establish the rules. It's interesting, that, isn't it?
frustrating.
It's very interesting, but yes, I mean it was nice to come back. Actually, I always like that. But
It is, and I find I'm not very good at I do need structure. I suppose if you think about it, what is the word when institutionalized? I am. I've never had a job outside teaching. You may
of
be
course, yeah.
You may be different to me, Yannick. I've
No,
never
no.
had not a proper job. I've done little summer jobs and various things, but it's it's something that I've always been in. So it's kind of difficult. It's kind of difficult to understand what something else would be like. But I mean,
It's true, yeah.
as I was going to say, I remembered what I was going to say earlier. Now, I imagine if we don't see it from the point of view of the kids enough. I don't think, because if you think about it, one thing that we used to have, and again, we're hankering back to the good old days, Yannick, aren't we? We're going to probably start to sound a bit like that. But the students used to have more downtime, it felt like to me. They used to have more downtime. It seems like the school day has got quite compressed. Schools I've worked at have reduced the length of the day. They've squeezed the lunch time. They've squeezed the break time. I used to spend lunch break just the whole hour playing football. I don't know. I don't think that helps. And when imagine a PD, if you go for some CPD in a day, you're nice and bright eyed. You're all keen at the start of the day. But imagine if you had 5 1-hour sessions every single day, 5 days a week. Each of the sessions was about something completely different. And that's what it's like for the kids. And I think we do sometimes forget that we are dealing with children. And it is, I don't know if, again, there'll be a chain of thought. There'll be people who don't like that. They'll be saying, well, no, you've just got to be tougher on the children, Tony. You've just got to be, and that's a fair point. But at the same time, I think it has changed for students. And obviously the elephant in the room, isn't it, that again upsets some people, is the pandemic. Because sometimes people will like to talk to you about how the pandemic has changed student need. I think it's had a very profound effect on the needs of students personally. And I think it's a profound and quite long-lasting effect that we're still feeling. I think that the needs of students have changed quite significantly, but we haven't. It's not easy for schools to change to meet that need. That's how I feel. How would you feel? Would you agree with that? You don't have to.
I mean, I don't know. At some point we'll have to move on from that as well. I think we can't. And it's done, and then we need to move on. So I'm not sure what the needs are, but what are the needs, like socializing and things like that.
Well, I think it's, I don't know. The digital world is one that I find quite sort of frightening.
Yeah, true.
Of how it's instant gratification all the time. It's in people's spaces all the time. If I go, there was a time when I'd get the old games console out, the Sega Mega Drive. Let's really date ourselves, Yannick, now.
PS2.
Yeah. And we'd be having a go on that. But you wouldn't have all your mates online with you, would you? You wouldn't have, if you've got, say, a TikTok account and you're posting things on your TikTok account and people are making comments. I don't know. It just feels like everyone knows everything about everyone, it seems to me. And I don't know, that just seems to me to not, it's great in a lot of ways. It's amazing. It's like it's allowing us to talk now. So I can't knock it, can I? It's literally allowing us to talk now.
So it's true, but I think, again, with, schools, they just ban phones and there's no, I've been in a school, my previous school, and that was quite interesting. It was, so when I joined the schools, kids were allowed their phones, and it was awful. Yeah. And I was a bit surprised because I'd been in a school before where phones were banned, and I didn't realize that. And I thought, oh my God. And they had decided I don't know, she made the decision after Christmas, phones will be banned. And I thought, oh my God, that's going to be awful. So on the day came and not a single phone were to be seen. And I thought, you know what? I was surprised. Oh, well, it was that easy. I mean, obviously, exaggerate a little bit, but do you know that reminds me when in 2000, yeah, showing my age there again, in 2001 in France, when they decided that smoking would not be allowed in bars and restaurants
Mm.
from February. So from one day to the next day, nobody was allowed. The whole of society,
Mm.
well, they just made a law and it happened, didn't it? So the
Yeah.
next day,
Yeah.
nobody, and I thought, well, so you can do things like that just by
That's a good
saying
point.
that you're doing it, and
Yeah.
nobody would dream of smoking in a restaurant now. And
No.
when you tell people, again, when you tell kids, when I was young and I used to go in a nightclub or in a restaurant and people were smoking beside me, and they're like, what?
Mm.
But that, so when there's a will to do something, you can do it
Yeah.
without having to shout, without having to fight. That's what's going to happen, and it's happening. I mean, of course, there will always be people who don't follow the rules. That's life.
Mm.
But
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know,
I know,
like
I know
you
what you're
hear,
saying.
yeah,
So you've got to be brave enough to say, right, we're going to do this. We're going to, because this is going to make a difference in this school. This is causing us challenge. So we're just
which
going to go ahead and do it.
which brings us to the topic of leadership. I think the leadership is the key thing in any school. And you're right, change of leadership. If you don't have a vision, if you don't know what you want to achieve, the school's a mess. Like people don't, and then us as teachers, we look up to leadership to follow to follow the lead. Just like kids in your classroom, if you're the leader, and the students will usually follow you. Even in it takes a little bit more time with students, obviously, because the kids, but things, when you know what you want to achieve, it's usually doable, and you don't have to go into all these fights with with everybody to achieve something, if you know what I mean.
No, I
No.
do know what you mean. I think it's if you can get them on board, if you can share that vision and get them to buy into the vision, I think teachers are excellent at that. They will get on board and they will work together on it. Like you say, it doesn't need to be a big deal. So if
And
you, yeah, go on. Sorry.
yeah, no, and I think parents as well. They're obviously they're your most important allies. And it's important to keep them in the loop and to communicate. A lot of parents, when I ring, complain that, oh, you're the first person who rings. Oh, thank you for it. Often parents say that, don't they? Thank you for
Mm.
ringing, because, and I know I'm a parent myself. So I like to know, if my kid misbehaves, or and
Absolutely.
that has happened, obviously, but
Yeah, and
um,
it's being on the other side of the table from
now,
it.
so however, I would say, just again, as a parent, I would 100% support the school, but don't rub me off the wrong way. If you know what I mean, there's a way to talk to parents as well, just like there's a way to talk to students as well. It's like, and I see that sometimes, even in my school, I think, well, why do you asking a kid to take their coats off because it's the rule? Yeah, okay, it's the rule, we know, but always like,
Mm.
can you take your coat off, please? Not like, come here, yeah, why, yeah, that's a detention. Oh,
Yeah,
unnecessary.
it doesn't need to be that struggle. I mean, I had that today with somebody with a coat on. So yeah, it doesn't really need. It doesn't. You don't need that level of struggle, do you? So yeah, parents usually most parents I talk to are absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
To be fair, do you think there's an argument that we're maybe a little bit soft with parents, or we sugar the pill a little bit with parents?
Yeah, I think yes, we are, but at the same time, I think a lot of parents, again, showing my age, you don't learn to parent.
Mm.
On a parents' evening for year 11, I was talking to the parents and telling them, right, when he comes home, just get the phone and make them do an hour of work, and you should see the looks. The parents
Mm.
looking at their kids a bit horrified, and I was saying, well, who's the boss there? And
Yeah,
sometimes the kid at the love said, I am. But that's
yeah,
it's hard. It's
literally.
it's easy to say that, but I'm a parent myself, and I know, like with my first one, we were very good at the phone. The second one, it's been so much more difficult. And I'm an educated person, and so you can imagine people who don't have those necessarily the skills and who don't necessarily know about education. and sometimes they need help. I mean, I don't want to
Absolutely.
sound condescending when I say that, but they need, they need to have that discussion. They need to know that they're not alone. And that we're here to work together.
Absolutely, because they may not have that role model. They may not have that older person who can give them advice.
Yeah.
In order to do it. So I don't think it hurts for us to sort of, advise them to some extent. But yeah, I think that's a really important point.
And
sorry, go on.
Yeah,
Carry on.
I mean, every time, when I started, every time I gave a student detention, I always rang the parents very quickly to tell my story before they but nicely, you know what I mean? It's like, say, right, look, I'm new, I'm establishing myself, nothing to worry about. I just want to tell you that happened, blah, blah. Parents were usually incredibly supportive. And the next day, often, students came back, say, oh, you talk to my mom, sir. I say, yeah. Well, I've been grounded. Oh, yeah, that's great. Never had any problem with students like that again, and that easy thing to do. And then, the parents, when they come to parents' evening, and that's really relationship,
It can be really effective. The vast majority of parents, when you do that, it works really well. And you've got, like you say, you've made that contact with them. It really makes a huge difference, doesn't it? It's a powerful thing.
But again, I think it's something that we should be trained to do, because we're afraid to ring parents. A lot of teachers are. And I understand why, because if you don't know, I mean, again, you and me, I'm a 50, I don't care. And I don't need to shout at parents. I'm not going to be nasty. I can handle this. But someone who starts, it's very easy to get into a conversation, argument, and then you lose the parent, and then it's messed up.
Absolutely, and that isn't something that we really train. And I think it is something, like you say, I agree. A lot of parents, a lot of teachers are reluctant, or maybe they have a bad experience. I have to say, it's very, very rare. I've maybe had one or two in my career bad experiences of calling a parent and thinking, I don't think I'm going to call them again. It's rare that happens, I have to say.
But that should be part of your training. If I've got an ECT or a PGC, I say, right, okay, we're going to ring that student's parents. I'm going to show you how to do it, because we don't know. It's not easy. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. Ring a parent.
No,
and they are your allies. So that's the problem as well. If you don't, you've got a problem with a student, and then it becomes like 3 months before they come to see you, and then suddenly you realize there are all these problems. Well, of course, they're not going to be happy, are they? And it makes it more difficult. And
if it's the 4th or 5th call they've had that week from the school, and it's really using the right sort of phraseology, and trying to bring in sort of some positive aspects as well, bringing a bit of balance in. And the same when I'm dealing with the students themselves. I say to the students, look, the toughest student I have, I'll say, I really like you as a person, but I really need you to do this.
The behavior, not the person.
The behavior, not the person. That's exactly it. The behavior, not the person.
We know all the tricks.
We know all the phrases. We know all the phrases. I'm just going to mention again, John Catt Books. Guys, if you are interested in 20% off, doing a little bit of CPD in your own time, doing a little bit of a reading round, I would recommend having a look at the John Catt website. You can get 20% off using the code JCTTR2425.
A lot of educational stuff there.
Yes, absolutely. More educational stuff, reading around. I mean, I have a whole school responsibility. So I actually, like I said, I don't read enough around what I'm doing. So one of the things I'm going to be looking at is sort of flipped learning. I'm trying to find a book on that, but we better not get into that, because we'll maybe go a little bit off topic. So I wrote down a load of questions, but it's never good just to go through a series of questions. But one of the things that I did think, putting a positive spin, something that we had a little chat, Yannick and I had a little chat about earlier, guys, actually. What are the plus sides of teaching in what we would call a challenge in school?
The plus side.
Yeah. What are the good parts of being in a school where there's maybe more challenge than than average.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the students in my school. I mean, I like students in general. So I mean, to me, kids are kids, and I like being around kids. But I think what I like in my school is their maybe their honesty. I think they and I tell you what, something I really like is that they get humor, and I think that is something I really like it's obviously quite a lot of ethnicities in my school, and I like that I can say things that are a little bit on the edge, and they absolutely love that, and I that is great. Sometimes you got because in teaching you've got to be so careful about everything you're saying all the time.
Absolutely.
It is again draining on a day-to-day basis where
It is.
and it can be anything and everything.
Yeah, and it doesn't take an awful lot
No.
to get you, to get you into trouble. And sometimes the temptation, it's such a balance, isn't it? Because the temptation is to banter back, and banter is one of those big things. There's a lot of banter, and something that I've sort of come quite familiar with when I've worked in challenging schools is there's a real banter culture, and that can be really useful, but it can also go a little bit maybe too far, and it can lead to, well, the banter bullying sort of like.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, it absolutely can it has the potential to really powerfully improve your relationship with students, doesn't it? Obviously, what they tend to go for with me is the lack of hair up top. That's usually what they zone in on for me. And in fact, I was going to put a pair of headphones on today. My other half told me that I look like Saturn. So, so apparently it's not just the kids, but but like you, and I think we spoke about this earlier, the students can, they throw a little bit of banter at us. They can say a few things to us, but actually sometimes it is meant in a nice way. I don't know whether it's sort of particular to challenging schools, but I find a lot of students, they're quite mean to each other as well. But I don't know. Do you know what I mean? That's it. I don't know whether that's an English thing. Maybe that's a good thing to ask you, Yannick, actually, because I think it's an English thing to really take the mickey out of each other.
No, I think it's probably international, that.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Because I mean, I see an awful lot of that with students that I work with, and they can be sort of quite mean to each other, but they seem to take it personally when it's their friends. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is tricky. It can be tricky, that, I think. But as you're saying about the banter, they need to see you as a person, as well. You're not just a teacher who teaches subject.
And that's the thing. And that's what when I've spoken to people who, I don't know, people get different things out of teaching. I get a feeling that some people, what they get out of teaching is just results. Maybe I don't want to upset anyone, but we're here to discuss these things. I felt like some people that I've spoken to in the past, it's not about enjoying being with the students and the banter and the relationships and everything else. It's all about what numbers on that piece of paper when they leave. And I've never been about that. I don't know about you, Yannick. I've never really worried. Maybe I'm in the wrong job. I've never worried about what my results are. Obviously, I know they're important, and I know I want them to be as good as they can be, and I want to do the right things to get the students to that point. But I think when you work in a challenging school, particularly, it's you need that personal sort of relationship with students. Because if you don't have that, I mean, I'd always go as far as to say, if you don't have that, then you're making it almost impossible.
It's interesting. There's an interesting comment there on the screen. Yeah, I agree. It's do you see that? There's the danger of banter not lying in the erosion of respect.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
It is a good point. It is. Yeah.
And again, it's like it's a mind. It seems like there's minefields now, because everything cuts two ways. Mental health is the other one that we hear spoken about an awful lot. People's mental health, teachers' mental health, students' mental health, and sometimes there is an issue in schools I've worked in before where it has got out, where I think it's got out of control. And the other thing that I've seen a problem, Yannick, is what I'd call a no snitch culture. I don't know if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, totally.
And that as well can be dangerous, because when you get that banter, it's almost like that then becomes expected. There's going to be banter. I'm going to call you this. I'm going to call you that. You've got to accept it, or you're the one with a problem.
I mean, you're right. And I think, to kind of maybe try to answer that question, I mean, as a professional, you've got to be vigilant and absolutely put a stop to it as soon as you can see signs of someone not being happy, someone not taking that as banter. Because, we're experienced, we know, and we talk to the students as well. I say, right, sorry, was that not on? Okay, that's fine. It won't happen again. And off. And we don't get things right all the time because we're not machines.
No.
And as long as you do your best, and again, I have sometimes upset some students. I've said something that was like that meant as clearly a joke, but which and that's right. Apologize. Sorry. I totally. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? I apologize. Anything you want else.
Yes, and the students need to understand, and I think that is part of growing up, and that's something I like about working with students, because they're not the finished article, are they? They're still learning, and when they make mistakes, you can excuse it. When an adult makes a mistake and says something rude, I always think, well, no, you've got no excuse because you're an adult. So that's the other thing that's great about working with students. I mean, the thing I will get is someone, and it depends on what you say. So sometimes a kid says to me, I've said something and they're not very happy with me, and they'll suddenly turn to me and they'll say, "Sir, did you choose to go bald?" And what they're trying to do is obviously hurt me with it. And at that point, I know that they're trying to just insult me. But sometimes, like a kid I get on with, the other day, a kid said to me, and this was a new one, which I thought was brilliant. This kid said to me, he said, "Sir, when you're cleaning your face, how do you know when to stop?"
I've seen that before, yeah.
That's not.
But like, the thing with working with students is that even though you know everything, you've covered everything, but they still come up with stuff that impresses you or amazes you or makes you laugh. And I love that. I don't think there's a single day where I go and I don't have fun, where some student would have said something to me, said, that was great. Oh yes, why didn't I think of that before? And I'm 50, and and that that's great. It's great, isn't it? And then but it is important for me to have a good time, Oh,
100%, 100%. And I think if we're talking about challenging schools, like I said, I think that's why teachers in challenging schools, because in my first school, it was quite sort of a leafy suburban school. Good. I think it was Ofsted good. It was quite relaxed and sort of a chilled sort of place to work. And I always used to think, why are teachers going to these really challenging schools? What are they thinking? Are they mad? But then when you work in one of these schools, you kind of, you need to stick it out. And anyone who's watching this thinking, as a younger teacher thinking, should I work in this sort of school? It will be about a year before you really start to feel it depends on the school, but certainly with schools I've worked at that have been really challenging, the students haven't accepted me from the word go. And we spoke about it earlier, Yannick, didn't we? We know that those students will be expecting you to give up on them, and because they've seen it again and again, they've had cover, they've had teachers coming through. But once you get through that and they've accepted you, it's so rewarding. I would 100% recommend it to anyone to work in a school where it would be seen to be challenging.
And it's quite interesting, because sometimes I talk. I mean, I haven't been here long. I've been here like 2 years, and I was talking to some of the students, and I was telling them, so they've got another teacher, and they were rude to that teacher, and so in the classroom, blah blah blah, took and said, remember how rude you were to me when I started, how awful you were to me. I said, no, we weren't, sir. I said, I said, I tell you that when I joined that school, I nearly left because of you, because how rude you are. All the things. I said, no, that's not true. We never did that, ever. Always respected you. I think, how do and I find that quite interesting that they don't remember, but I do.
100%.
And
100%.
it's very strange now to see that, like, because like between year 7 and year 10, they're so different. They're different kids, aren't they?
Oh, they do, and you see them, see them grow up, don't you? And it's it's interesting to see how they change as they get older and how they mature. And
Yeah, that's fun as well. That's fun as well. That is another thing. That's if you stay. Yeah.
It's a privilege, isn't it, really, to see
Yeah.
that, and especially when you see a student who's really difficult in 7 and 8. I mean, particularly 8, when you're in that year that's a little bit sort of the in-betweeners, as some people call them, the sort of years where it's not really that important a year. You're not picked your options yet, so but you see them from then mature and start to behave more like adults, and it's really great to see, to be honest. And it happens time and time again. And I find there's not, like you've said you like working with students, and I do as well. And I feel like sometimes it is hard to like one or two of them. But when I really think about the individuals, sometimes as a group it's hard work. But when you think about the individuals, there's no kids who I think I really can't stand this one. Do you know what I mean? And obviously that's another thing. You do need to enjoy it, and you do need to get something out of it, don't you? In a tough situation, because there's going to be, let's face it, there's going to be challenging days. There's going to be days you'd rather forget. And it can be unpredictable as well. I find, I don't know if you'd agree with that. Sometimes you predict it. Sometimes you think it's going to be brilliant and it's a disaster. Sometimes you dread it. You go in and it's and they're fine. And it's that, I find that a bit frustrating. So I'd like to know why that happens, but who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Of the moon.
But sometimes I'd love to have an office job. But I realized I just couldn't cope with it. I just couldn't cope. But yes, sometimes it'd be nice to have, to be able to have a wee when you want, or a coffee when you want.
Absolutely.
Or, being able to sit down and say, oh, I'm going to do nothing for 5 minutes now. No, you can't. You can't. And that, I think people who don't teach don't realize that how draining it is. So I know I can't, it's not the word because that's not a positive word, but how
I know what you
how demanding it is on your mental state, because whatever you feel, you're there, you're in charge.
Well, someone said to me, you're making more decisions than an airline pilot. Yes. I don't know where I read that. That might just be complete rubbish. I don't know. But we certainly are making, if you think about the amount of decisions, trying to put it into context, just in case anyone's not a teacher, just imagine the start of a lesson. You've got to get the kids lined up. You've got to get them in. You've got to get equipment out. You've got to do the register. You've got to have a recall task. You've got to then deal with people who've not got equipment. You've then got to deal with any behaviour. You're doing so many things at once. And I always think if teaching looks easy, it's because that teacher has honed their craft. It's not because it's easy. It's because they're planned, they're organised, and they've,
routines. Yes, and just expectations is incredible. But you do not learn much from someone who's very good. Actually, you don't learn much because you don't see all the work underneath.
Which is why I'm so good at training teachers. You see. Come and see how many mistakes I've made in this lesson. But
they always come and see me first.
Absolutely. Right, I think we're coming up to an hour now. So we're getting into the sort of last sort of minute. We don't have to be spot on for finishing. It's nice to see. I just want to say thank you to Teachers Talk Radio just for giving me this opportunity, because this, we just love talking shop, don't we, Yannick? Teachers just love.
Absolutely. A bar of teachers, we called, I think, as a group.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's just something we enjoy doing, but it's just such a privilege to be able to come on here. So I just want to quickly thank Tom Rogers and Teachers Talk Radio, and anyone who's watching, anyone who's following along. I can see that we've got quite a few, 355.
Thank you. You'll get much better guests later. So that was
Yeah, stick with it. It can only get better from here.
Exactly.
But I just also obviously I want to thank Yannick, because Yannick, you've been absolutely brilliant. It's been I've had such a good time talking to you this afternoon.
Yep. Likewise.
Wish you a really, really relaxing. Hope you haven't got too much work to do once we go off air. So have a really great evening. It's really been really good talking to you. Thanks ever so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Wishing all teachers out there and non-teachers a really good summer term. Right. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.